Everybody, welcome to Plants and Politics. I have a great guest today. I'm excited to get to know him myself and to introduce him to all of you. It's Mr. Liam Omara. He is a historian. He's a professor at Chapman University, and he is running to unseat Ken Calvert in the 42nd District here in California. The guy needs to go. And so I'm excited to get to know Mr. Omara and have him explain his incredible ideas and what he wants to do in Congress for you. So welcome, Mr. Omara. How are you today?
Hey, good. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for taking time out. I'm sure you're very busy in these final weeks, run up to the election, but yeah, I can only imagine.
No, this is actually been a lot of fun. It definitely keeps you busy.
Yeah.
I think if I hadn't at least had the experience of doing my PhD while I was working full time and was, from that used to working 80-hour weeks, it probably would have been brutal.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's definitely been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably most parents would know what it's like.
Yeah, exactly. It's you got a 24/7 job after you get off work and put up traffic to get home. So, totally get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, you've been a teacher, you've been a professor for quite a while. What was the impetus? What was the driving factor and, aha moment that you said, I got to do this. I got to run for Congress and try to make a difference.
Pardon me. Yeah. So there's two different and related answers to that. One, in terms of the aha moment, was seeing how well, and they're very different candidates, but how well both Bernie Sanders on the one hand and Donald Trump on the other resonated with voters, despite being really not what people would expect from a politician. They're not the typical, one point, very scripted, perfectly, Bernie's like, his hair's all out and does his thing. Yeah. And people are like, yeah, I love this. So there's been a bit of a sea change in American popular culture that respects authenticity more. And it's the only thing that really, I guess, makes it possible for someone like me to run for politics, because I'm not going to fit myself into a little box and pretend to be, that perfect little person. I'm going to be who I am. So there's what makes it possible. What pushes me to do it is looking my students in the eyes and having to explain to them that their expectations are markedly lower than previous generations, that we are in decline in our real economy. My generation, Gen X, is the first one in American history not to do better than the one before. We're a little worse off than the boomers, and the millennials are worse off than Gen X, and Gen Z is worse off than the millennials. We are on a downward trajectory in terms of what people can do in this country, because pay has been stagnant for 40 years, but the cost of everything is going up.
Yes.
And I'm frankly a little bit pissed about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I come from the same generation that you are. I'm a Gen Xer, and I see my kids struggling. I have a millennial and then 3 Gen Zers, and it's so tough for them between the 2008 recession and now they're getting slammed with this, and just in general, like you said, costs are going up, wages are stagnant. So tell me about that. What is your vision for, let's say, a living wage for people?
Well, what's most frustrating is the degree to which some really destructive propaganda has taken root in the US, and people are basically being taught to be happy with crumbs. I listen to people making arguments, and it's almost like listening to feudal peasants defending, their status relative to the dukes or something. It doesn't make any sense. It's not like previous generations where we had this sense of anything is possible. And, this American dream that we all can reach for. There's a sense now that opportunity is only open to a few people, and that's okay. And that bothers me. So one of the big things that I want to do is push back against those arguments and get us thinking again. I have people all the time that are just yelling like, that's socialism. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is exactly the kind of stuff that would have passed under Eisenhower or Nixon. It's just our politics have gotten crazy in the last few decades. There's nothing at all radical in my proposals. I'm literally saying, let's go back to what FDR and Truman and Johnson and Kennedy and to a large extent, Nixon and Eisenhower were talking about, when we still had that sense that anything is possible and opportunity is for all.
Yeah, I agree. And I would argue that you are the moderate, because you have majoritarian views. Exactly. I know that you're a supporter of Medicare for all, correct?
Yes.
And especially at this time in the pandemic, I mean, when millions of Americans have lost their health insurance, it is a majoritarian position. The majority of not only Democrats, but independents also support Medicare for all. So
drifting in that direction for a while, which has actually been fantastic, because we were talking about this in the 1960s and it just disappeared. And we're the only major country to tie it to employment. It's just never made any sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, with COVID in mind, I'm sure you're keeping up on the news as I am. So, we've got a 1.8 trillion bill on the table right now, or stimulus package.
Right.
Both sides are pretty much against it. I mean, Pelosi has said no. McConnell has said hell no. Republicans in the Senate are against it. Is that something that you would be for?
Well, to be honest, the way our government has handled this entire crisis is infuriating. It's completely bass-backward.
Yeah.
I mean, developed countries all around the world didn't bother with like the unemployment insurance. They set up wage subsidies so that people could keep their jobs, but the businesses didn't have to suffer when they sent people home. So you would go home and either work from home, work part-time, or simply not work at all because the business is closed down for one reason or another, but you wouldn't lose a dime. You're still getting paid. So there's something up to protect that. There are so many ripple out costs from unemployment that we're just not paying any attention to. We should never have had, I mean, Italy was hit really hard with this and their unemployment barely budged.
Right.
It just didn't happen at all. So the fact that we can't even get a small stimulus check and we're fighting about unemployment insurance when we should have been doing much more and doing wage subsidies, it's just infuriating to me. And it gets back to the simple fact that most of the people we have in Congress do not even understand how the economy works. They don't understand the importance of keeping people working. They're happy to hand out billions to corporations, but they will not actually prop up ordinary people. Yeah. I mean, we should prevent any kind of evictions over this sort of thing. We should have kept people in their jobs. I mean, all of this could have been done better. All the stimulus proposals they put out there, almost all of them don't go far enough. And they still won't even be touched.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's once again, they're buying into this notion of trickle-down economics and instituting essentially socialism for the wealthy and the corporations. And the rest of us have to, sit with our hands out, hoping, praying that they'll take mercy on us, like you said, like peasants, Yep. And it never happens. So, yeah.
Some more.
Yeah. Yeah. But what fed into, I mean, was there a moment that you just said, this is it. Nobody else is going to do this in a way that I could do it or has the vision. I know Regina Marston, I believe her name was also in the running in the primary and you did very well, above her. What do you attribute that to?
Some of it has to do with
the feedback you're getting from people in the district.
Right. It has to do with, a number of different things. First off, a better understanding of the issues and being able to actually respond to and defend a wide range of different policy positions, why this matters, and to do so to different audiences based upon their perspectives. Because I've often lamented that Democrats will adopt, say, more conservative policies to run in more conservative areas rather than framing them in a way that just makes sense and basically helping to win the arguments. We just give up. And I don't understand that. So I've taken much bolder positions and have been able to defend them. There's also a sense of authenticity. I heard from a lot of people the fact that her background is in marketing, that it looked more like a cardboard cutout as opposed to a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of matters to me too. That again, I mean, and granted, there are people that prefer that kind of politician, but I am much more the authenticity, you know, like let's actually put ordinary people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then really it just gets back to, if you're asking why do I think that I should have run at all? I mean, it's never been about me. It's never really been that I think I should have such and such or be such and such, because I don't really understand this idea of like a personal drive to power of any sort. To me, it's about public service. It's about serving the public. I don't want to be a career politician like the guy we've got in there now. I want to get in, do a job, solve some problems for the American people, and then go back to teaching. And to me, I see a broad similarity between the two positions, because we used to have politicians that actually helped to get ideas across, that led instead of following. Now we got a lot of politicians that wait for the focus groups to tell them it's okay to take a particular position. They wait for half the country to support something before they'll do it. And that's just not the kind of leadership that we used to have in this country, nor the kind of leadership that we should have. So I want to be out there making noise and pushing things and getting us to understand things a bit differently. And if I can contribute to that change, I'll have considered this worthwhile.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I agree with you, I think. And one thing that struck me on your website was you saying, I'm not going to change who I am to run for office. You either, take me as I am. That's kind of how I've always been in life. It's like, I'm not vanilla. You either are going to like me or you're not.
Right.
And that's just the way it goes, but you always, and I appreciate it. And because I say the same thing as you say on your website, that you may not always agree with me, but at least you know where I stand and you're always going to get an honest answer.
Right. And I'm always going to be willing to talk too. And that's also important. I mean, our current incumbent refuses to talk to almost anybody. And the only people he will talk to are donors and people who already agree with him. I will sit down with anybody, regardless of their positions, and I'll listen to their concerns. I'll tell them where I'm coming from, and we'll see if we can make sense of the differences there, rather than just talking down to someone.
Right, right. And let's talk about Ken Calvert for a moment, because I'm somewhat new to the district. I grew up for the majority of my life in Orange County, so I'm relatively new out in the 42nd district. But I did a little bit of research on him, and it's disturbing to say the least. The majority of his money comes from a military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. Speak on that and how that affects decision-making.
Oh boy, that's a nice one. Yeah. I mean, especially given my interest in foreign policy and global politics. Wow, it's a huge one. Ken has voted for every single use of force. He's always happy to do that. Why? Because it's going to make money for his donors. That's really it. Anytime that you can increase the spending on something, anytime you can push the budgets up for something even far beyond the Pentagon would want, he's there to do it. And perfectly willing to push through just crazy earmarks on bills that will help out those donors. So realistically, he works for them. They're his constituents. Lockheed Martin is his constituent. Northrop Grumman is his constituent, not the voters. And what he expects to be able to do is, quite frankly, sit on his ass and then every couple of years throw a bunch of ads on the radio and on television, a ton of signs up, and then just coast in. He takes us for granted. He assumes that the voters don't matter. And that infuriates me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I think each district, of course, has its own little niche and certain things that are important. I mean, out here in the 42nd district, definitely it's traffic. It's definitely, trying to get to and from Orange County for work. Do you have ideas and plans around that on how to bring more commerce into this area That way people aren't forced to spend their entire lives on the freeway and give up quality of life.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the biggest differences between us, and I wish more people were aware of it and thought about it, because tons of voters really care about the traffic. I mean, we're spending hours in our car, and not only is it the traffic, the amount of cars and trucks in the area give us the worst air quality in the state and among the worst air quality in the entire country. So we're poisoning our kids, wasting our time in our cars when we could be enjoying our lives here.
Yeah.
And Calvert, given his background as a real estate developer and still connected to his company as a real estate developer, he cares about those bedroom communities that are filling the area up and making money. And he's perfectly happy to do that. And the best you're ever going to get from him is he'll occasionally like, oh, well, I pushed through an earmark for some more money for like this new freeway off ramp or something. Like, that doesn't solve the problem. You're just like, it's just a Band-Aid. What we need to do is develop the local economy. And there are ways to do that. One good way to do that is to put more money in ordinary people's hands. If we're spending more, it will stimulate more business in the area, and we'll build more sustainable businesses in this area. If we want to participate in the more high-tech economy we're headed towards anyway, we need a better educated workforce locally. As it is, all of our students have to commute out because there's not a single university in the 42nd. We don't have one. We need a Cal State in this area. And in order to produce like the skills, and we need more trade schools available in the area as well. So standing for tuition-free trade schools and colleges and demanding a better college in the area, and pushing things that would broadly increase the business climate in the area, improving our wages. It's one of the reasons I stand for a basic income. After 40 years of stagnant wages, we simply don't have the money to spend, and are not spending. That shrinks the real economy. If you want to help small businesses, give people more money to spend.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to put money in the hands of consumers. I mean, like I said, this whole trickle down economics thing is so, as you said, ass backwards. It's never worked. It never will work. I mean, businesses wouldn't be businesses if they don't have anyone patronizing their business, which is why we're seeing, even though things are opening up, people are too afraid to go out with COVID, and they don't have money to spend. So,
it's very frustrating, because we used to understand that. It was understood bipartisanly too. You go back into the 50s, 60s, early 70s, and people still got that basic Fordist principle that money in the hands of the workers is spent so you sell more stuff. So pay your workers better and they can spend more in the economy. It helps everyone. It's literally how we created this middle class life, and what we used to have the highest standard of living in the world when we were doing this. Today, we're down to 17th because we gave that up. And I don't understand why it's so difficult to get back to it. Who doesn't want to make more money?
Yeah.
I don't get why that's difficult.
Yeah.
But we keep arguing to give more money to the so-called job creators, and then hoping that they will create a decent enough job. But we're not actually creating the incentives that would make it a decent job, that would give it a living wage, that would let us stay afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. And the research is very clear that when they gave the unemployed that additional $600 boost over the summer, before the summer, I should say, and then the $1,200 stimulus check, so many people were lifted out of poverty over that period of time.
Temporarily, but yes.
Yeah. And we could do that continually. I mean, I look at how much money is spent and wasted on political campaigns. I mean, I see how much Ken Calvert has taken in, how much he's spending. And we need to level the playing field so that voices like yours can be heard more, number one, so people have a real opportunity to make a choice. And then just literally, like what we were saying, so that he's not beholden to the military industrial complex.
Yep, I mean, and that's pretty much it. It's the defense industry, land developers. He's 98% funded by corporations and wealthy special interests, not by ordinary people, because not coincidentally, he's not really standing for ordinary people. It's not a coincidence either that $600 a week unemployment is what you'd make at $15 an hour. If that was the baseline, the entire economy would grow. And again, vast amounts of empirical evidence that after more than 40 years of it, trickle down doesn't work, but money in the hands of the workers does work. And what frustrates me is to hear people out there like, make America great again. I'm like, cool. So we can like use some of the policies from the 60s that made us a global power. And like, no, it can't do that. Like, what are you talking about then? Like, what is the point? Like, if you want to make America great again, how about actually paying people a decent wage so the economy grows?
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be a time when the middle class was robust and they fueled the economy. I mean, they were the heart and soul of the economy.
Everyone got richer. We created plenty of millionaires in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and everyone was going up. The poor and the working class were rising out of poverty. Ordinary people were going up. I mean, you want to talk about some of the anger that people see on the streets today, and people don't understand where a lot of these protests are coming from. Back when Martin Luther King was talking about our overall economic system and the disadvantage to a lot of minority communities, the black-white wealth gap was about 4-1, and today it's 10-1. The situation has gotten worse and not better, and it's like, why do we not understand why this is hard? I mean, why people are angry? It's if we had, and he was actually talking about a basic income back then too. Yeah. And the idea is if you solve poverty, it lowers crime rates. And this is something that too, again, there's so much evidence around the world. We already incarcerate. We have 25% of the world's prison population. We lock up more people than China, India, and Indonesia combined. Like a population of 3 billion people, we have more in jail. And it doesn't lower crime. We can see that we still have the highest violent crime rates in the rich world. What would solve that crime is the same thing that all the other rich countries did. They let people get better off. They ripped people out of poverty. They took away the desperation. If you have a choice of, a job making a good living wage or, selling crack on the streets, like most people are going to take the good job. Because there's less risks involved and there's more dignity involved in it. But if your choice is like $7 an hour at McDonald's and a lifetime of poverty and dependence on welfare just to survive versus dealing drugs, that's a much harder choice it's hard to judge those choices, but we do. And we blame the victims of poverty.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And I think overall, we would have a healthier society in every way. I think addiction would go down.
Yes.
I think we would see physical health become better. People would make better food choices and lifestyle choices.
Right.
Because, like you said, I mean, desperate people do desperate things. And and there's a lot of anger. And so let's kind of touch on that too. You're talking about the anger in the streets. Let's talk about racial injustice right now, that's been going on forever. Where do you stand on, the Black Lives Matter movement, the defund the police? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're all relatively nuanced, I guess. Obviously, I stand with Black Lives Matter and the basic call for equality, which is what the laws were supposed to do. And de facto, we've been headed in the opposite direction. And actually, segregation has been climbing since the 1970s, and we're getting more segregated instead of less so. And a lot of that really has to do with deeper systemic issues, many of them tied into the economic decline and the way it's affecting some populations more so than others. As far as the whole defund thing, Ken's running tons of ads saying that I'm calling for it. I literally never say it. I mean, a lot of them like answering questions like this because it's not really the point. For me, what I'd like to see is money spent on other types of first responders. So you make the police redundant in a lot of cases. You basically take them out of situations that they're ill-equipped to handle because, frankly, they don't have the training to deal with like a lot of, domestic disputes or mental health cases, things like that. And we basically set up 911 to have a range of different responders that are able to come out. So like behavioral health people can show up, fire can show up, police can show up, instead of essentially going to a police dispatch right away. So I'd like to see the federal government stump up cash to help municipalities around the country roll out systems like that without directly touching the police, and at the same time address a lot of the deeper economic issues so that you can raise more people out of poverty. Over time, what we'll see is crime rates fall as people are better off, and fewer incidents with the police because they'll be less often in situations where again, they're not trained to handle them. And at that point, it will become a conservative argument to defund, because like, why are we paying people to sit around? So they will gradually lower it, because you'll find that they're just not going out as much.
Right.
You know, rather than if you dive into that first, when people talk about those things first, what you're doing is you're basically just walking into a trap. It's like a social issue at that point. You're basically, people can, I mean, Nixon won on this, you know, the whole like law and order kind of rhetoric there, playing on fears. Fear works for a significant chunk of the electorate, and people would be worried about more crime given that crime rates are currently high. So I want to solve a lot of those problems first, so that it becomes like a consensus position that we don't need to have as much of this militarized policing. As far as the police themselves, the main thing I tend to point to are qualified immunity was a terrible idea.
Absolutely.
And we do not train police well enough relative to the rest of the rich world. In Europe, it's between 2 and 3 years everywhere. Here, it's, you know, 7 to 10 months. You know, you do not have the range of training to deal with a lot of situations. So a lot of times the people in this job, they fall back on, you know, like instinctual reactions as opposed to having the training to respond more effectively. So I'd like to increase the training time.
Yeah, I agree on that. I heard something, and I didn't do the research to find out if it's true, but I heard that like cosmetologists and hairstylists have more training than police.
That is literally a fact.
That's insane.
Not only does it take more time to become a it takes more time to become a hairstylist than to become, you know, a police officer. And you have to go through regular recertification as well.
Yeah.
It's much more complex. I mean, and given how important this position is in society and how trusted it is, I would like to see it have similar standards.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I worked in real estate and mortgage for many years. And yeah, you have to, you know, go through training every 4 years, do an ethics course, and learn about, you know, right and wrong every 4 years just to renew your license. Why don't we have that for police officers?
Right. And improving some of the types of training too along the process. Like we've seen many cities roll out de-escalation training. And where that's done, and especially where that's done well and effectively, the incident levels fall dramatically because the people involved actually have the skill set needed. They have the right tools to pull out. I mean, in many cases, it's not about the person at all. And I hate that Calvert is depicting this as like I somehow hate the police and I'm trying to like attack people there, because people go into policing for the same good reasons that people go into tons of other professions. They want to do something good in the world, but the system itself is problematic. And if we can fix some of the broader social issues, and if we can fix some of the issues in the way policing is structured, then it'll be a lot easier to be able to say like, oh, it's just this problematic person and not the system as a whole, because that's where we are now, where it's essentially pushing people into the wrong sort of situations on a regular basis.
Yeah. Do you think, this is a thought that just occurred to me, that in a way, even if it's maybe not consciously, that Republicans want to keep people down and in poverty because then they're not socially conscious and socially involved, civically, you know, involved and civic minded, because it seems like the people who don't vote, I mean, we know this based on Pew Research, the majority of people who just don't vote in this country, they've just given up. And the majority are people of color, they're poor people, because they just feel like it doesn't matter. And two, I think when you're so focused on just putting food on the table and so focused on just trying to survive every day, you don't have time to pay attention to the news. You know, I was a single mom for 5 years, and yeah, it was, I mean, night and day job, and literally, you know, up at 4 a.m. and I'd crash at 10 p.m., putting my son to bed, and have to get up again at 4 a.m. and do it all over again. And yeah, you don't have time to be involved. You don't have time to care about anything else than your own survival. Do you think that's a part of it? That maybe because they know the more people who are engaged and paying attention, that they will go, you know, the Democrats have a little bit better deal for me, and especially progressive Democrats.
Yeah, especially. And it really is deliberate. And part of it comes from more of I guess, a psychological predilection towards authoritarianism, toward, traditional power structures. And you kind of, people don't mind as much if someone's sort of skimming off the top because, hey, they're in power. It's okay. There are some of those features there, but I think most ordinary Republican voters would be a lot more sympathetic to a people-centered approach. It's more the ideologues and the politicians on the right. And for them, it's a much more explicit and deliberate strategy of misinformation. And it's why there are so many attempts to, say, for example, let's defund education. Let's demonize education as a whole. Let's say that like history isn't history and it's all just made up. And, we should instead give these patriotic myths like the president is saying now, or I don't know, the loss of civics education. I mean, we used to have the equivalent of 2 to 3 years in high school of good civics education that taught people to care about the politics and to vote and that their voice really mattered. And today, vast swaths of the population have no idea how our government is even structured. I mean, poll after poll show that, large chunks of the population actually think that the president outranks the other branches of government. Or that they would actually be fine with a military coup and military rule because they don't care about democracy anymore. And part of that gets back to the sense of hopelessness you pointed to. A lot of people feel that this system has left them behind and just doesn't matter anymore. And it's just one corrupt politician after another serving the same, elites. So who cares? And I think that's it's sad, but a lot of it, from the perspective of like the party and its ideologues has been deliberate because a population that is struggling to feed itself and to survive does not have the luxury to pay attention to a lot of deeper issues. I mean, we're not going to pay attention to local or national politics, much less what's happening in the world, which is why, I mean, so many people actually are absolutely convinced that Trump has taken troops out of the Middle East and, actually ended the wars and brought more peace. I'm like, are you kidding? We're still fighting in 8 countries around the world and he has sent more assets into the region, but he says he wants to do X and they don't have time to look and see what's really happening.
Right. Yeah.
And that's very deliberate.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I find that a lot. I see a lot of that on social media where Trump supporters, and it's the same on the left too. I found, Trump supporters in general, though, will see him make a speech, they'll see him talk at a rally and say, I'm going to do X, or my administration is working on XYZ. And they just assume it's done. It's, like he was saying, he's going to lower prescription drug costs. They think he's already done that. When, okay, yeah, in a couple of states now, he's playing around with this program to import from Canada, but overall, rest of the country is still operating the same as it always has been.
And honestly, even there, it's basically a scam because not any discussion of like importing drugs from Canada is still saying that the American company can make it, sell it at a profit to Canadians, and Canadians can sell it at a profit back to Americans. And it avoids the real problem of U.S. laws allowing them to gouge American consumers directly. Yep. It's a stupid workaround just intended to keep making money for people.
Right.
But yeah, people on both sides are definitely frequently conned, and for the same basic reasons. We don't have time to really look into things. You don't have time to see what's really happening.
Right.
And realistically, even if we were all better off, most people are still not going to spend the time looking into the details of policy, which does mean that we need a more honest media and more honest politicians who are actually able to talk about these issues and not just play the smoke and mirrors game.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what scares me too on the left. I mean, I believe Trump is a massive threat. I think he is an authoritarian figure. He is a fascist wannabe. His comments on the Michael Reinhold murder which now appears to be a cold-blooded murder by U.S. Marshals, saying that they didn't want to arrest him. I mean, that really just sent me over the edge. But I also see it on the left. I see it from liberals as well, with their willingness to go along with anything that Nancy Pelosi says. They don't do any research. It's all about personality and not policy.
Right.
And like you said, unfortunately, what do we do when we have media that is so entrenched? Also, let's face it, they're getting money from the same corporations. The majority of their money comes from big pharma. If you watch any of their programs, the majority of their commercials are for one drug or another. So they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, piss off their big pharma contributors and the people who are funding their MSNBC and all these different stations. What do we do? It just seems like such a tangled mess that it's like, God, where do we even start to pull this ball of yarn?
Yeah, it really is. And so many of the different issues are interconnected, which is one of the reasons that I thought that as a historian of ideas, I might have something to contribute to the national conversation and could contribute profitably in DC talking about these things, because I could talk about the relationships and get people to stop talking about little Band-Aids and why don't we actually address the core issues? Why don't we really fix the problem instead of just dancing around it? Yeah. And so often, and I see this a lot on both sides, I see this a lot from Democrats too, is they're basically proposing Band-Aid solutions and they're not willing to talk about the underlying issues. And some of that really does come from the fact that they are funded by the same kind of corporate interests and they're unwilling to upset them. Mm-hmm. So what we need is enough representatives that are thinking about people first and solutions first. And if you don't replace all of them, you get in enough of them and it starts to shift the balance of power. And then many of the people who did get into politics for the right reasons, but just got corrupted by the system and by the amount of money in it, can say, okay, no, I can shift because now we will definitely get enough votes to pass this. And we'll be able to fix the underlying problems. Until we get the big money out of politics, it's just going to keep getting worse in this country for ordinary people because there's no incentive to fix things. And the media is no help at all. If 5 corporations control nearly everything you see, and they're all massive multinationals with tons of interest in tons of other areas, they're not going to talk critically about anything that affects their bottom line unless we force them to.
Right. Yeah, just like the Tea Party kind of took over Republicans, I think progressives need to take over the Democratic Party. And like you said, there's those who are just kind of going along to get along and they figure, well, this is the system. I may as well, they talk a good game, but they're on the grift too. But if they see the balance of power shifting, just as after Trump got elected, the balance of power kind of shifted. And so Republicans were forced to go along with him because they saw that was the will of the voters. That's his base is with him and his ideas. And I think people on the left don't understand that. They keep talking about, well, Biden, he's not going to have enough votes for Medicare for all. Well, when 80% of Democrats want it, 69% of the country in general, including Republicans, in that number, there's the will of the people needs to at one point or another win out. So
only a fifth of our representatives. The actual elected Democrats don't want to do it. And it's not because we don't want it, it's because of the money that gets them elected.
Yeah.
So the money is still ultimately the issue with a lot of this. And all of this really though is one of the reasons that, again, some of this may come just from being a historian, but I tend to think about the systems more than the people. So rather than judging a particular person as problematic, I'm thinking about the motives that drew them in, the circumstances in which they face, on their day-to-day lives. And if we can fix a lot of those issues, it corrects things. Like, okay, so Barack Obama may generally have believed a lot of the things that he said. He may have been a really good person. I'm not going to say anything at all about him because I don't know. And he seems like a good guy. But he came in talking a good game about ordinary people. and he governed as a neoliberal. In 2008, we had a historic opportunity to realign the economy to help ordinary people because the bankers screwed everything up.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we rewarded all the bankers, let them take millions of dollars in bonuses and put them right back in charge of a broken economy. So yeah, the stock market improved under Obama, but ordinary people, many of them never recovered from the '08 recession at all.
Mm-hmm.
They just lost wealth.
Yeah.
And we did not fix that problem.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of like dissatisfaction. It's one of the reasons that a number of those populist swing voters shifted away from Obama in 12 and then toward Trump in 16.
Right.
And we have to bring them back. And the way to do that is to talk about the real issues. So I try not to talk about people or judge the people. I honestly think a lot of people really have the right intentions in getting in politics. And this is true on both right and left. But the systems that they're in and the belief systems that they've absorbed affect what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we need to challenge those narratives. We need to stand up and say, like, look, this neoliberal agenda that you're pushing here does not work. It helps a small segment of the population and leaves everyone else behind.
Yeah.
And fix that.
Absolutely. I mean, Citizens United absolutely needs to go, needs to be overturned.
Right.
One of the worst things ever. But yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think a lot of people did get into politics with the right intentions, with pure intentions, but then they saw their competitors bringing in all of this massive amount of cash from corporate interests. And so just to feel like they could compete, they felt, okay, well, I guess I got to do it too. If you can't beat them, join them, that old saying. But that's why I think Bernie's campaign especially was so important, because it rewrote the narrative. It absolutely showed that, no, you don't need corporate interests. You don't need a corporation and super PACs to fund your campaign. If you, like you said, if you're authentic, if you are willing to fight for the people and tell it like it is, and they feel they can trust you, they're going to stand with you. They're going to get behind you.
Yeah. And the one thing that a lot of people, I think, don't understand is that it wouldn't be a permanent requirement anyway. We wouldn't have to constantly fund elections if we just get in enough good people to change the rules here. I mean, a lot of times the anti-corruption narrative is actually popular on both left and right as well. I mean, 90% of voters, period, say that there's way too much corruption and way too much corporate cash in DC. Hell,
Absolutely.
Trump won in part by the whole drain the swamp crap. Now, he appointed swamp monsters to his cabinet positions and is governed as a swamp monster, but he said it. And that was actually astonishingly popular. If you could actually push through a constitutional amendment to say that money is not speech, what it is just poisoning, our republic. Yeah. If we could actually put that in, you could get it through. But it's the elected officials that will not support it, and that's why the state legislatures wouldn't. Wouldn't pass it, and we would never get it through Congress. So we really need to fix that as an issue. Yeah. And I think the way to do that is to get ordinary people to give up the sense of like learned helplessness that we have. Sheldon Adelson can write $100,000 check. I can't do that. Therefore, my dollar doesn't count. It doesn't really matter, but it does. Like the price of a cup of coffee a month sent to a progressive candidate in one of these purple districts that you can flip is absolutely worth it, because it's not the $5, and it's not even just $5 a month. It's that you get thousands of people to do it, and you can win almost any House race in this entire country. It's not as expensive as we think. And if we put enough people in to change that balance of power, we'll get the laws that will give us publicly funded campaigns and take the corrupt money out completely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so many people, like you said, they have this sense of dread and they've resigned themselves to, well, nothing ever changes. It doesn't matter. I've been voting, and, they stole the election from Bernie twice and blah, blah, blah. But he has changed it. He just Bernie running, even though he didn't win, he's changed the narrative completely. Exactly. Even Trump. I mean, as much as I loathe him, I have to say he woke people like me up. I was one of those people, unfortunately, and I'm embarrassed to say it, that just checked out I was like, well, I guess they know what they're doing. And, life was okay for me. And so shame on me for not paying attention to others who were suffering, Yeah. And
Exactly. I think people often get they get the sense of despair when something doesn't work out because
mhm,
they tend to think this is the one, this has to work. But it's more of a process. And
mhm,
staying involved matters, and especially getting involved in the Democratic Party instead of leaving it, because you're never going to punish the party by voting third party. They're just not going to care. Once you leave,
yeah.
they no longer have to pay attention to your voice. They'll simply focus on the base they have left. And that's
Mhm,
honestly how the party has gotten to where it is today. So many people checking out from it. But a
yeah.
lot of these candidates really can be transformational. Bernie took an idea that had fallen out of the mainstream, single payer healthcare, and brought it back in a big way
Mhm,
and made it a mainstream position that had overwhelming support. Polls before Bernie's campaign did not show majority support for Medicare. It's there today because he made a
mhm,
good, compelling case for it. Yang brought basic income back out of obscurity, and now it is a mainstream position. You can actually take it. Or like, more fringe candidates like Williamson or Gravel that were talking about the
mhm,
military-industrial complex. They
mhm.
got more people to pay attention to those issues and to care about them. And I find in particular that a lot of younger voters really do care about foreign policy and our constant wars, where older voters
Yeah,
don't. They're sort of like
yeah.
accustomed to it and don't care.
Right.
Bringing these up really matters.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, in many ways, Bernie did win 2016. And
Yeah.
both of his campaigns really had a marked impact on our political discourse.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think we would be talking at all about it, wouldn't be in the consciousness of everyone in America, Medicare for all or ending the endless wars, if a lot of these more populist candidates hadn't run and brought them, even though I don't care for her, but Tulsi Gabbard, talking
Right.
about the endless wars. I mean,
Right.
um, yeah, but
She certainly had a lot of fans. And what a lot of these candidates do too, Yang, Gabbard, and Sanders all pulled voters from the right.
mhm,
And not because they adopted right-wing positions. Their positions were solidly progressive,
right.
or often like, center left, populist, and they pulled them over because of the way they framed issues.
Mhm.
And for all of any individual candidate's flaws, they're pointing to a way that really would work to fix this country overall. Instead of staying in these tribalistic opposing camps that don't even have that many differences on the
Mhm.
economy, if you actually start talking about good kitchen table issues again, things that affect more people, you'll draw
Mhm.
more people to your side and you'll convincingly win. When
Yes.
Democrats maintained that New Deal ethos, we controlled the House of Representatives consistently for nearly 40 years.
Wow.
It was almost never in Republican hands. Um, and as soon as they gave it up, they began losing seats. And
Yeah.
that was eroded a little bit at a time. And since 94, we have seldom held the House, largely because even though the Republicans are lying about their positions, because
Mhm.
their economics are bass backward from what we would need,
Right.
they're talking to working class people.
Yeah.
And Democrats have stopped speaking that language. I
Yeah.
think one of the things that Bernie really shows is that you can bring those working class voters back into the fold if you are sincere in standing for and with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, I see this all the time on social media, even my friends that are liberals but think they're progressives, they're the faux progressives. They don't get that putting on a kente cloth and making these social overtures of pro-choice is not what's going to change voters' lives. It's not what's going to win them over because it doesn't affect them on a daily basis. And yeah, you can put on all the kente cloths you want, but until you change the economic situation for people of color in this country, they will always be in a position of not having power, not being equal.
Right.
So, yeah, it's frustrating. And so I do worry, again, if Biden does win, I worry that the Democratic Party is going to take all the wrong lessons from his win, and they're going to entrench themselves even more in this neoliberal stance and feel that, oh, see, Bernie lost twice and everybody voted for Biden. That's what they want. They want this moderate, Republican light type of candidate who's really not going to change much of anything. He'll care about climate change to a certain degree, but he still wants fracking. I mean,
I would say, I'll be frank. I would say that that's not a fear. That's a certainty.
Yeah.
And you've seen that now literally for decades. Bill Clinton won in 1992 with only 43% of the vote. And they still took the lesson that was a good direction to go in. And nothing has ever changed that. And we've run repeated neoliberals. Nobody took the lesson from Kerry's loss.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody paid attention. People wouldn't even take the lesson from 2016, knowing that a bunch of Obama voters went for Trump and that 12% of Bernie's primary voters went for Trump was not enough of a lesson for them to care.
Yeah.
Because it's too enmeshed in a basic systemic problem for them. The way that the money actually does drive things is just too deeply entrenched. And it's not really about people anymore. It's not really about getting back to talking about people. The candidate that talks about people is going to pick up votes, period.
Mm-hmm.
And our two major parties today, both of them in different ways, Republicans try deliberately to suppress votes.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats frequently, not always obviously, but will frequently only pursue a certain chunk of the electorate. Yeah. And it's creating a deeply tribalistic politics that leaves a lot of us behind. And I think we need to care about the people that we're leaving behind and the people that just decide, well, voting doesn't matter. This doesn't affect anything, and bring more of them in.
Yeah. Yeah. More and more I'm feeling like I don't really have a party. I recently switched to independent status because I don't feel like the Democrats are listening. I feel like they're trying to pander to the wrong people and not getting the message. And like you said, there were so many people who did flip from Obama to Trump. And that wasn't, they're not racist people. That's not why they voted for Trump. They voted for Trump because, as you said, he had this populist message. It was all a bunch of BS. We know that. Yep. We assumed, and now we have the proof over the last 4 years that he didn't care. He did what he typically does. He just finds the weak point with everyone and exploits it. But it's a message that resonated, just as Bernie's message resonated. And that's what scares me. The other night I was listening to Michael Cohen's podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it at all.
No, I think I have.
He had on, what is his name? The Ragin' Cajun. Oh boy, he predicted. He's always on MSNBC. Older guy who's been in politics. Thin.
Carville?
Yes, James Carville. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. And he was saying, Michael Cohen asked him, okay, well, what laws are we going to put in place to assure that things like what we're seeing now with Trump, these authoritarian type and, despot type of maneuvers that he's using effectively to subvert laws, to just, exert his will. What can we do to change it for the future, for the next Trump? And his response was, there's not going to be a next Trump because he's going to get beat so badly. What would you say to that? Because I lost my mind. I was alone in the house and I'm screaming, wishing I had somebody to talk to about it. I was like, they don't get it.
Yeah, no. And whether or not they just don't get it or they're being disingenuous is always hard to tell from individual people. But I think a lot of them sincerely don't get it. And they're too caught up in their own bubble. It's the same sort of person who would have argued that the economy was great under Obama or under Clinton when it wasn't. Clinton's economy created a lot of jobs, but it created tons of low wage jobs that did not pay a living wage at all. And those don't really help the economy. They're actually a negative for the overall economy. And the stock market did great under Obama, but most people never recovered from the '08 recession. And we've continued to lose people from the middle class. Poverty is rising for many people in this country. But the people who did all right, and if that's your crowd, you're going to see, oh, well, clearly it's doing okay. And you're not, you're just out of touch. I think in many ways the Carvilles of the world are wildly out of touch, and they caricature large parts of the population. You know, like, silly rednecks or whatever, and like don't actually deal with the situations that are driving this.
Yeah.
I think that we really need to, if you want to prevent another Trump, and I'm going to tell you very bluntly, we will get worse than Trump if we do not solve the underlying problems.
I agree.
Biden is not going in intending to solve the underlying issues because he does not understand that they're there.
Yeah.
So we need to push people in who do understand that there are deep systemic problems in this society. I mean, again, when we have 25% of the world's prison population, something is clearly wrong. And it bothers me to see so many people.
Helped to create, by the way.
Yeah, and it bothers me to
Unfortunately.
see so many people essentially arguing. And like, if you cut through the noise, what they're essentially arguing is that Americans are uniquely awful people, that there's something just genuinely wrong with us, and we don't deserve the same kind of freedoms or rights. We're down to 52nd in the world in individual freedoms. We're down to 27th in social mobility, and people are just saying, well, just put up with it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We don't need an American dream anymore.
Wow.
And I mean, defending the crime and saying that, well, we just need, like, to put more people in jail. They're just bad people. No, Americans are not a uniquely awful people. We're just put into a bad situation. And if we follow the templates the entire rich world is laying out here and solve the poverty issues, if we increase people's sense of opportunity, people are less likely to want to break into a 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would push for that. And a lot of Trump's populism, at least, there are definitely elements of right populism where they frequently do correctly diagnose the problems, but they don't really have good solutions.
Yeah.
And sometimes people on the left can be sucked into that too. Trump's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership was well received in the left. And it's honestly possibly the only thing that I genuinely like that he's done in 4 years was killing that as an idea.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the right misses the boat here is it's not trade that's the problem. It's the way we structure trade to favor only the corporations and not people. If you allow these things to circulate around, but the economy is actually strong, if its foundations are good, it doesn't hurt you. The Germans have an economy 1/6 the size of the US's, but they literally export more than we do. Not per capita, total. And their unemployment is usually around 3 to 4%. It's always extremely low because they train people for the jobs that exist in the economy, and they invest in ordinary people. And you can do that. We absolutely can compete. It's absolutely possible to compete around the world. But again, on the right, it's like, blame China. China's cheating. They're not cheating. They're just doing what makes sense.
Right.
So why don't we?
Yeah.
It's like, take a little responsibility for our own decline and fix the policies. So I get when people are saying, like, make America great again, because they feel that sense of decline. But they're refusing to actually talk about the policies that would fix it and that would make us competitive again. And that's one of the things that I want to try and at least bring into Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am 100% on board. I couldn't agree with you more on every issue. So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, what is your sense of, based on polling, based on what's going on, the feedback you're getting from the community? What do you think?
Honestly, we have a solid shot. And it's remarkable because the numbers at least are there in terms of the demography. This is technically a purple district, but solidly red in its voting history. But it's always been possible to flip. The two problems are the right kind of message in order to sway people to your side, to bring more of those independents in and to excite people who normally wouldn't vote. And at least enough funding that you can get the message out to people. we've of course still struggled with the latter because it's hard to raise money in these inland districts that are perceived from the outside to be solidly red. But we've done pretty well, especially during a pandemic in our fundraising. And just in the last like 45 days or something, we've raised about 45 grand. I mean,
nice.
We're doing pretty well overall in these latter stages here. But the early months of the pandemic, when everyone was terrified, it got really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But the numbers for us, and actually the outside projections, are honestly fascinating. If you look at the statistical models on it, we have about 3 times the chance of flipping the district of the last couple of candidates to run here.
Oh, wow.
And that's remarkable because the demography itself hasn't changed much. And not all of that can be attributed to Trump, because Trump himself is still relatively popular in the area. Mm-hmm. And I suspect he's still going to carry the 42nd. He took it by 12 points last time.
Yeah.
And I've literally already seen people bragging on Instagram that they voted, and they voted for me and Trump. And it's not because we have anything in common. And again, it gets back to my argument that Democrats do not need to shift to the right on their policies in order to win these votes. They have to speak sincerely about working class issues.
Yeah.
If that holds, and if right now in the early returns because you get to watch the ballots as they're coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And far more Democrats are voting than Republicans.
Yeah.
If that stays the case, if our turnout stays high, we win. It's always going to be dependent on Democratic turnout. There are, just to give you a number, there's 158,000 voters in this area that already align with us politically. Calvert won won last year by 130,000 votes, and the last presidential year by only 149,000. Nice. So if we turn up and enough Republicans are pissed at Trump that they don't vote, we win.
Yeah. Yeah. So the previous, that's one thing that I didn't look into, the previous candidates out here, were they more of the cookie cutter, faux Republican, kind of Republican light type of candidates?
Well, not really. I mean, many of them have been, I guess what you could call more generic liberals. I mean, the just basic ordinary Democrats, not trying to run on much more populist message. The most recent one was actually pretty progressive in overall policies, but not populist in orientation, meaning did not frame the issue as well for people. So had the heart in the right place in terms of like policy-wise, like the positions to take, but didn't get them across effectively to the audience that she needed. And some of that it's just strategic more than anything else. It's just recognizing the type of district. But yeah, previous to that, most of the candidates that run out here have been, more mainstream liberal Democrats, and there's simply not enough Democratic voters. In order to sway enough independents and populists, you need messaging and framing that suits them. Because the district was about 30%. It's up to 33 just because of Trump, but it's been about 30% Democratic for the last 10 years. And that's a little low to flip the district with just Democrats. The last one that was really close in aesthetic to what I'm trying to do would be Hedrick's run in 2008. And he did talk much more about economics and about the money we waste on foreign wars. And he came within 2 points of winning.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's more of a model for me. And the district was actually more Republican then than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
It was 45% Republican. We're down to 39.
Wow.
So it is definitely possible to do, but we need to excite the voters that we need, and we need to drive them to the polls and not just pander to a particular base.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the argument I make with my liberal friends is, they say, oh, you can't run a progressive in this area or that area, kind of like the, McGrath-McConnell race. And I'm like, but they've done this dog and pony show so many times. They try to run Republican light, moderate, Dems, and people get frustrated with that. They figure, well, what the hell am I even going to show up for? I'm not excited by this person. If they're not going to be that much different than what we've already got, I don't even care. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And that really is the argument for me for the whole Dem-enter idea, like becoming a Democrat. Because I did kind of the opposite of where you've gone. I've historically been more often an independent or a green. And I fully committed to being a Democrat only during the 2016 race. And it was seeing people like Bernie do well, and then the rise of like the squad style politicians, and that they were starting to do really well, that got me thinking, you know, like, okay, rather than just, I don't know, being outside of the system, not engaging with it, not being part of the fight internally, and then just thinking in terms of like, I don't know, I'm protesting the system, or, you know, get involved and fix it. Like, because I mean, we see the problems and it is possible to fix. It just takes people and energy. Like, we can do it. So I threw myself into it, hoping to like push the Democratic Party back to be the voice for the people that it used to be. I want a party that's out there talking about ordinary people like Truman's was, or Kennedy's was, you know, and actually wants to get Americans to dream again, and not standing there saying, well, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. We've seen just empirically too that populists and progressives do well in rural areas if you can frame the issues well. And we forget that the Democrats used to dominate the heartland of this country before the realignment around social issues, when the racists were evenly distributed in both parties. You know, it's not like, you know, Oklahoma or Kansas were less socially conservative, but they voted more on economics. People care a lot more about their basic quality of life. That's the first thing that's going to drive a lot of people to the polls. And Democrats used to dominate those issues in the New Deal era. And we've given that up. And I think we need to take it back. And if we take it back, we can take Nebraska, we can take Kansas and Oklahoma.
Because we're so far away from what we used to be as a Democratic Party, and we've lost all the working class because, and it's not that the Republicans are doing anything for them.
they're actively harming them.
But
there's a shift in rhetoric. But that talk does matter to voters. And this is not like disparaging voters, because honestly, no one should have to spend the time looking at policy. We all have things to do. We all have jobs, kids, and everything that's sucking up our time. We have to trust the media and politicians do a better job of getting these messages out in the first place. But you saw that, I mean, why people could not have recognized the problem back in the 80s is always so frustrating to me as a historian. When vast numbers of lifetime Union Democrats signed up for Reagan. Why did that not tell people that realignment in the early 70s to focus on college-educated professionals was a bad idea? And it has been a bad idea, and we've been doing it now for 40 years, pursuing a bad idea. And I think it's time to get back to our roots.
I mean, ideally you want everyone in the tent, but if the only people you're focused on are the upper middle class and wealthy and well-educated, and we're seeing a decline in higher education in our country because of the costs, that's kind of a clue that you're not going to do well in the future.
Exactly. Like, and if the educated were like the base you were going for, why have you been so resistant to higher education funding? I mean, why not tuition-free education? We've walked away from it in the last few decades. The University of California system used to be tuition-free. It's just world-quality research institutions. I mean, really good campuses. Some of the best universities in the world are in the UC system, and they were completely tuition-free for decades.
And I didn't even know that.
We gave up on that, you know, and instead, we've shifted the money into a loan system, which is essentially a scam. If the money that was put up for the loans was simply put up to fund the education, I mean, one of the things that frustrates me a lot too about any kind of discussion around higher education in this country is that you get a pushback from someone saying, well, I didn't go to college and take on debt, so why should we support their, you know, forgiving their debt or whatever? It was their bad life decision. Well, A, we do need people to go to college because of the range of jobs that we need. And B, if you were to forgive that debt and make it tuition free, it's a massive stimulus to the entire economy. So maybe you didn't go to college and you're simply a carpenter in the area working, building houses and extensions and whatnot. Like, you know, like great for you, right? Now, what if more of those college educated professionals suddenly aren't paying $1,500 a month in student loan debt? They can afford to build onto their house, and boom, you just got another job. Everyone benefits. But we don't talk about it that way. We tend to talk about, as Democrats, we'll talk about issues more in the moral terms. These students shouldn't have this lodestone around their neck. People shouldn't go bankrupt for healthcare, blah, blah, blah. It's always like the basic moral issue. And that doesn't appeal to enough voters. But if you can tell someone that my approach to healthcare is going to put $10,000 of your own money back in your wallet, more ears perk up.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons that Dementor makes sense to me is that if you run populist, you can, and you frame things right, you can pick up those people who don't normally vote or might vote, Republican even, and you can keep the liberal base as long as you're still talking to them.
Right.
There's a way to put them in dialogue and basically expand our coalition. We should keep the educated professionals and invite the working class back in.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a popular saying in marketing, which, I had to dabble in because when you're self-employed, you have to learn marketing. But it was always that everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? And so, you have to frame it in that way. You can't not everybody is going to have an open heart to others, especially if they're struggling themselves. They're like, well, what about me? Why should I help? Or I also run into people who say, well, I had to pay for an education. I had to have debt and I had to pay it down. Why shouldn't other people have to do it? So like you said, if you can frame it in a way and you get them to understand how it does help them, how it is beneficial to their life, it's just like Medicare for all.
Exactly.
I'm married to a lifelong Republican. I don't believe that he's truly a Republican. He argues with me on that fact. I believe that he's much more of an independent that, is socially liberal, maybe a little bit more financially conservative, but not a lot. So I don't believe that he's a true Republican. But, I explained Medicare for all to him and he's, I don't want our taxes to go up. And I'm like, but what about all of the businesses that then can pay their employees more in wages because they're not having to pay for health insurance for all of their employees? What about all the new jobs that will be created because they don't have to face that burden of taking on? What about all the people now? What about all the great talent that small businesses will now be able to attract because they don't have to lose them to larger corporations with better benefit packages? So,
right. Yeah, exactly. So Calvert voters, take note, his arguments on this are completely dishonest. First off, Medicare is not a government takeover of healthcare. It's literally setting free the private sector to do what it's supposed to do because you would have a thriving free market in providers. Right now, with all these different insurance things, you're locked into a particular network. Right. So you might be like, hey, Liam, I have this great doctor. You should check him out. I'm like, cool. Oh, he's not a network. I can't go. Yeah. Right now, we're stopped where otherwise they're able to compete directly with one another. Right. It also dramatically lowers the administrative cost, which lowers the cost of healthcare overall because the hospitals don't have to have administrators juggling a bazillion different plans and figuring out what the hell is even covered. Right. Because it's one Cadillac plan that covers everyone and covers everything. And the other thing that really gets me on this too is just the issue of cost. Like, oh, my taxes will go up. Like, no, you effectively get a massive tax cut because people have to think in a society like ours that puts the health insurance into an employment compensation package, right? It's part of what you agreed to accept when you took that job, right? It's part of your overall pay. They're just giving it to these private insurance companies. So if they're paying 15, 17 grand a year to these private insurance companies, but the Medicare system is going to cost them $2 grand and you $2 grand, right? So there's four, right? So you're getting at least an $11,000 raise there. If we build that into the legislation and said, you get to keep the rest of that as part of your compensation package, everyone immediately gets, wow, boom. I mean, hey, I could use an extra 11 grand a year. I don't know about anybody else, but I could use an extra 11 grand a year. I mean, it would make a significant difference in my life. Yeah. So it's not a tax rise. It's literally a tax cut. But we tend to, as Democrats, use their language or well, yes, it would be a tax rise, but you get all this. And as soon as you say, yes, but it's a tax cut, you've lost the argument.
Yeah, we allow the right to frame our issues all the time. It drives me insane.
All the time. Yep.
We're always on the defensive. Yeah, and and it allows you to maybe leave a crappy job that you're not happy in.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Exactly. Well,
I was in that
entrepreneurship.
situation, as a single mom. It was like, well, I got to stay here. I mean, I got my son and I'm on my own, and but I was miserable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. People could move out of state. They could
yeah,
take a chance on a different job. They could take a chance on starting their own business.
exactly.
Republicans are always like, we want entrepreneurship and small businesses. And we're like, cool, cool. So if we use a single payer system like this, then more people could do it.
Hmm.
You'd feel free to start your own business because you wouldn't have to worry about losing your good healthcare insurance plan and all that it would cost you to just buy it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we figured out the drug issue too, I mean, you're giving people a raise across the board because they're not having to deal with copays and deductibles and,
Right.
maxing things out before something is covered, and the huge, huge cost of prescription drugs. And I think that the country would reshift and refocus. I'm a certified nutritionist, and so my focus is really on health and and preventative health most of all. And I would love to see a shift towards that. I would love to see that as a
Mhm.
focus of our elected leaders, of telling people the truth once and for all, that no, these aren't inevitable diseases. These aren't,
They're lifestyle diseases, right? Yeah,
yeah.
we should talk about that in a minute, actually, because that's actually fascinating. And I was told that you guys do talk a bit about that kind of stuff normally. So
Mhm.
we can use that as a, a topic to wind up after this. But
Sure.
yeah, I just want people to think about healthcare just in general, and the way that we frame issues. I mean, it's oftentimes you're letting the Republicans choose the field of battle. They
Hmm.
set all the terms, and then we just play defense in a way that transparently favors them.
Yeah.
If we stop playing along and simply put things in terms that make sense, this is one
Hmm.
of the things, like I've always loved and respected Bernie's message discipline.
Hmm.
I mean, he doesn't. Trump could not troll him. It wouldn't work. I mean, Trump would try to do his thing in a debate, and Bernie would just keep plowing on and get his points across instead of responding
Right.
to what Trump is doing. And that's and because it's a trap. As soon as you
Yeah.
start answering him, you've lost already. And we
Yeah.
do that too
Or you
much.
start alienating people like Joe Biden did in
Yeah,
their debate.
right. Yeah. But the flip side of that is that there are a number of places where Bernie's messaging doesn't work, largely because of the framing that he chooses. Like him calling himself a democratic socialist when he's actually a social democrat in his politics
Mm-hmm.
is a mistake given the Cold War propaganda against the word,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But Medicare is another big one for me. I use it because it's so well known. We're stuck with it. But I also frequently say single payer just in general,
Mm-hmm.
because given that Medicare has been around since the 60s and has been watered down badly, and now Medicare often has copays, you do
Mm-hmm.
have prescription drug costs, and there's a lot of things that aren't covered. People will think, well, I have a much better healthcare plan from my employer than Medicare, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
vote no on it. So you have to say, no, Medicare for All is actually a massively improved package that includes dental, vision, mental health care, and covers literally anything. It basically takes the death panel bureaucrat out of it that's currently there, and means you're just whatever your physician says you need, you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way they wrote it, but they used the same label.
Yeah.
And I think that was
I had that
problematic. They
same
should have come up with a different
conversation.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
if we
I
just
told
use
someone I
different
wish they
terms.
had named it something else, because older Americans especially kept saying, well, it's not free. I pay for I pay for Part D or whatever on Medicare. And you have
Right.
to explain to them, okay, it's not, yeah, they use the word, but it's not exactly the same
It's not
thing.
exactly. Prescriptions are absolutely, there's no prescription cost
Right.
under the Medicare for All legislation, but there is currently under Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we often we walk into these traps because we don't frame our issues well, and I just wish we got better at that. Which again is, getting back to your first question, why did I want to get into politics? Well, I'm a historian of ideas, which means I study rhetoric a lot. The language used for things and
Mm-hmm.
how it has affected arguments and how it has swayed people over the years. If we can get better at that, if we can find people that can help us to frame the issues well to reach more people, then absolutely we can compete again all over this country
Yeah.
and be less polarized in the process.
Yeah. I agree. I think We need better marketing, really, for Democrats.
Yeah. But the marketing has to have substance, which again gets back to the argument you asked about the primary challenge, right? So marketing experience is one thing, but if you're marketing a bad idea in a bad way, you're still not going to reach enough voters.
Right.
It's still not going to cross over the people that you really need and make the big difference. We have to have the marketing savvy, and we have to weld it to good empirically driven policies. Like, where is the evidence? Not what felt good to me, or what a particular person convinced me of, or whatever, but like, where is the actual evidence? I want evidence to dictate the type of policies, and then the right framing to get those across so we can actually make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I can't imagine that anybody would listen to you, hear you out, and then go, nah, not for me. It just,
Yeah, and that's the big thing. It's one of the problems with the opposition having more money, is that it basically amplifies their bad ideas.
Yeah.
And you have a hard time getting yours across, because I've had those conversations over and over again. I've literally had people change parties after talking to me.
Wow.
We can actually talk to people in a way that makes sense. But we have to reach them. And that's something I think that if more of us just chip in and help out, we can definitely make a difference. We'll never need to spend as much money as they do, because the strategy is different.
Yeah.
But if you can reach enough people, you can absolutely take districts like this one. This is absolutely a winnable race.
Yeah, I believe that. Absolutely. Well, I will definitely be contributing today. And can you tell everybody where to contribute, where to find you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So my website is pretty generic, liamomara.org. I have a pretty generically Irish name, Liamomara. The only tricky part is it's a .org. But at the top, there's the volunteer and donate links you can get directly. Or if you want like a short link, it's like, bit.ly/Liam donate, takes you straight to the Act Blue there. So if you want to help out and support the campaign. But yeah, we always need people to help out, continue the phone banking and whatnot there. And really every little bit helps. I mean, even the smallest donations, they really add up. And if we can commit to supporting these kind of candidates around the country and just doing it on a consistent basis, like here's $5 a month. I mean, a lot of us can, get past the $5, but 25 or 50 or 100 might be too much, right? But if we do that and we talk to our friends and we talk to our neighbors, we can absolutely do this together.
Yeah, I agree. Manpower, and just, like you said, if everybody just gave $5 and you have thousands of people, my gosh, I mean, the difference we could make, and it would change everybody's lives. So much more than a latte.
Right, exactly. And when I'm literally running to lower your cost of living, and to win those arguments, I mean, it's absolutely an investment in your future and your children's future. If we get enough people here that they can change the rules and get this corrupt money out, then we'll actually be able to solve so many other problems along the way, and we'll all do better in this country. My elevator pitch to people, especially to like your independent Republican types, is I'm running to make you richer. I'm running to put more money back in your wallet.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm on board. I hope everybody else watching is, and I so appreciate you taking time out. Like I said, I know these are the final days and a big push. Right. So I'm gonna get this video out right away. And for anybody watching, please donate. Please do your part. Help out. If you can donate some time to phone bank for Mr. Omara, it would be such a huge help. I hope everybody watching will vote based on, what be selfish, what you want for your life. Do you want someone who's going to continue pushing the industrial, the military industrial complex, doing their bidding, keeping our men and women across the world fighting endless wars that do nothing for you, and voting for a bloated military budget every year? Or do you want, your health insurance covered 100%? Do you want better education for yourself and your children? that won't cost you anything. I mean, those are your choices. You can either have a guy who's 100% going to keep pushing war because it lines his pockets, or someone who's fighting for you and your family and things that matter to you every single day. So I hope everybody enjoyed this interview, and I hope that you will help out in any way you can and vote for Mr. Omara. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you for spending this time with me and talking about so many issues.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And just as a little closing point to your regular audience,
Sure.
If we could solve the poverty issue itself, the impact that would have on our physical health and our mental health, I mean, the reduction of stress, I mean, it's just incalculable. And there are great empirical studies showing that our overwork and being stressed about money is seriously negative impacting our health. And again, it's one of those places where people are often saying, well, there's something uniquely wrong with us. Well, Americans eat too much bad food. But no, like, we're simply hurting ourselves overall. And I want to bring this kind of like systemic thinking in, and how we can like help people overall. So again, if you want like a people-centered politics, a people-first politics, then I'm your guy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, couldn't agree more. Stress is a killer. And yeah, right now people are under a lot of stress for many reasons, and you can help to relieve that. So
Definitely.
Thank you again. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you running.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching Plants and Politics. The only way to take our country and power back is to spread the truth and build an army. So remember to like, follow, subscribe, and share on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again.